A very serious breaking story has just occurred, a tragedy. A Conservative member of Parliament, a Tory in the UK, has just been assassinated. He was out meeting with constituents when a 25-year-old man stabbed him multiple times. They tried to save his life, and unfortunately, he didn't make it. Now, we don't know the full details just yet, although many people are already inching towards, look, it's a Brexit campaigner, it's a conservative, anti-abortion, opposing gay marriage. Some people believe that this was motivated by leftism or perhaps Islam. We don't know. I'm not going to lay blame just yet because you really, really don't know. I mean, maybe personal issues, maybe family related. We really have no idea. The police haven't issued that information yet. But I do think this is a good time to point out a few things. For one, seeing this story, as well as the story of Jo Cox, who was killed in the UK around 5 years ago, I don't see this as necessarily escalation in terms of cultural conflict. Although the UK and the US are very different, they still have a lot of similarities in the culture war and what's happening to the West and progressives and all that stuff. This kind of thing happens. And we saw it a few years ago. We've seen it years before. We've seen violence. And that's why I think it's so important to call out all of it and not be accepting of it. Now, while we don't know that this event was motivated by a, say, far leftist or maybe a Islamist or anything like that, we do know that the media in the United States and the UK has been rather dismissive of far left violence. And while, again, we don't know that this is the case, we need to make sure we're highlighting all of it. Now, I can certainly point out what happened with Jo Cox. I can certainly point out that absolutely there are people on the right or people who oppose the left who are violent as well. With the media giving a free pass to say Antifa and the Labour Party and things like that, I think you're going to see more things like this. It is behavior that is excused. On Twitter, people are cheering for this. This is a horrifying story. Let me read you the news and we can talk about what's going on. Again, I think this will be a contributing factor in escalation between the left and the right, but I don't believe that this is the result of. I think sometimes these tragedies happen. The Daily Mail reports, Tory MP David Amess is murdered. Tragedy as married father of 5, 69, is stabbed to death by knifemen who stormed into his constituency's surgery in Southend Methodist Church in front of horrified onlookers, and as armed police arrest suspect 25 at the scene. They say the popular politician who won at the last general election with a margin of 14,000 votes was stabbed by a 25-year-old killer in a church, no less. His attacker sprinted into the church and stabbed him to death during the weekly surgery as constituents watched in horror. Paramedics worked to save the politician on the floor of the Essex church for more than an hour, but he could not be saved after the appalling attack. The murder bore chilling similarities to the killing of Jo Cox, who was shot and stabbed multiple times outside her constituency surgery at a local library in Birstall, West Yorkshire, in June 2016 by a right-wing terrorist. Sir David, a married father of 5 whose wife Julia is also his part-time caseworker, is the 7th MP to be murdered and the 9th in history to be attacked. It is not known if Mrs. Amess was at the church when her husband was murdered. Horrified constituents waiting to see the veteran MP, an ardent Brexiteer and royalist, watched in horror as he was stabbed, calling the police at 12:05 p.m. Police confirmed Sir David's death at around 3 p.m. Counter-terror officers and armed units are at the scene. One woman ran out of the church in the chaos, yelling down the phone after dialing 999, telling the call handler someone's been stabbed, please get here soon, he's not breathing. Essex police held the attacker at the scene and seized a weapon. He is now in custody and arrested on suspicion of murder. I love how they do that, but you got to at least respect the system. Suspicion. Yikes. Dude's right there holding the weapon. People watched it happen. Sir David, a Brexiteer veteran MP who has voted against gay marriage and abortion, was seen laughing and speaking to people on the steps of the church just 15 minutes before he was knifed. We could see a police cordon set up. Someone outside told me a woman had come out screaming on the phone saying someone's been stabbed. There was a lot of talk. Okay, right, we get it. Poignantly, Sir David wrote last year about the importance of meeting constituents despite what had happened to Jo Cox. He wrote, quote, she was a young woman with a family going about her duties, as we all do, completely unaware of the threat that she faced. While it is often said that good can come out of someone's death, it is difficult to see what good can come from the senseless murder. He also admitted he had been threatened at his home in the past and had to add additional security to his property. It is understood MPs will now see police present at all MP surgeries in a major shakeup of security. A parliamentary source told Mail Online that it is now essential. Quote, the Commons will have a complete review again, the source said. Police need to be at surgeries. It is the only solution. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the parliamentary system or UK politics. My understanding is the Commons is kind of like the House. It takes something like this to shock everyone into action. Another insider said we cannot have a disconnect between MPs and their constituents. MPs are already pulling their surgeries back because they are worried, but we cannot let them win. The electorate have a right to meet their MP. I completely agree with that. They complained that different police forces take different approaches. In some places, MPs are driven to and from events by police. In others, where there might be higher risk, they are not. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Speaker of the House of Commons, said, I am shocked and deeply distressed by the killing of Sir David Amess. David was a lovely man devoted to his family, to Parliament, and his South and West constituency. He was well liked by members and the staff alike, and during his almost 4 decades here, built a reputation for kindness and generosity. This is an incident that will send shockwaves across the parliamentary community and the whole country. In the coming days, we will need to discuss and examine MP's security and any measures to be taken. But for now, our thoughts and prayers are with David's family, friends, and colleagues. Kerry Johnson had led the tributes to the MP today, tweeting absolutely devastating news about Sir David Amess. He was hugely kind and good, an enormous animal lover and a true gent. This is so completely unjust. Thoughts are with his wife and children. Secretary of State for Transport Grant Shapps described Sir David Amess as a true parliamentarian. He tweeted, awful, tragic news about David, a dedicated, thoughtful man and a true parliamentarian who lost his life while serving the constituents who he worked relentlessly for throughout his career. My thoughts are with his family and friends at this time. Judith Cannon, deputy chair of the local Conservative club and friend of the MP, said, I just don't believe it. How anyone could harm a kind man like David, I don't know. I cannot understand how anyone could be so wicked to harm this man. Brendan Cox, the husband of murdered MP Jo Cox, tweeted after the death, my thoughts and love are with David's family. They are all that matter now. This brings everything back, the pain, the loss, but also how much love the public gave us following the loss of Jo. I hope we can do the same for David now. This is horrifying, man. This is really, really horrifying stuff. And, I mean, this is nightmarish. There's a lot of photos showing the police and things like that. You know, in the U.S., there's a lot of people on the left who say ban guns, but it's not going to change the fact that, you know, we live in, I don't know how to describe it, interesting times, to say the least. And with the internet and with the rapid exchange of information, it will be more dangerous in many respects. In today's day and age, someone can just know where a politician is. It's not hard. You can follow the person. You can see them posting. You can track their schedule. Back in the day, without the internet, you know, people in Chicago weren't hearing all that much about what was happening in the day-to-day operations of, like, say, someone in New York. But now people can just see on Twitter where anyone or everyone is, and it's becoming hyper-nationalized. And now you have stories like this. So I will say, look, again, I don't know that this is the result of escalation. These are things that happen. As noted by what happened to Jo Cox. Well, the Jo Cox Foundation has released a statement saying, we are devastated to hear the news of the death of Sir David Amess MP. We send our deepest sympathies to his family, loved ones, staff, and colleagues. All elected representatives deserve to be safe and to be treated with respect. Violence and abuse against them is utterly unacceptable. It endangers people and their families, and it endangers democratic life. The Jo Cox Foundation is committed to working towards a future where no politician is subject to violence or intimidation. The R.T. Hahn Jacques Smith chair of the Jo Cox Foundation said, this is a tragic loss for those who knew and loved Sir David. My heart goes out to them. I knew him as a generous and dedicated colleague in Parliament. Public life must be safe for those we ask to serve in our democracy. That is a responsibility for us all. Okay. Right now on Twitter, there are absolutely vile people cheering this on. It is the rule on the right that conservatives, at least in the United States, do not cheer on death and destruction. But it is the exception that there are people on the right that do cheer for this, that gloat when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes. Even Trump didn't do anything like that. Trump was like, wow, I mean, she was a tremendous woman and said very kind words. It is the rule on the left that they gloat and cheer for this stuff online, high-profile, verified accounts. And I think this may be due to something I've described in the past, some kind of bias effect we see where it works like this. Imagine there are two children, And one is covered in ice cream all over their face. Their hair is messy. Their shirt is all just disheveled. And the other child is clean and well kept. People look at the clean child and say, that's clearly the more responsible child. Not dirty, not all messy. And the messy child clearly was not raised properly and needs to learn some manners. But it may turn out that the reality is the mother is only allowing one child to have ice cream. You see what I mean? Of course, the child who's all dirty and messy is all dirty and messy. He was given ice cream. The other child is clean only because he was not given the ice cream. The analogy, the point. When conservatives' most egregious actors and even some of its more moderates are suspended, then the only thing left on the right are these very moderate milquetoast individuals. Like me, for instance, right? Now, I don't consider myself to be conservative, but in the culture war, you get the point. On the left, the craziest of crazies are given free rein to say crazy things. And so what becomes of the left? They fall in line behind psychopaths because they're verified, because they're allowed to say these things. Take a look at this story from the Post-Millennial. British Labour MP faces jail time for threatening to throw acid on woman. Okay, well, this is a particularly egregious example, but you can see just what the left is willing to do. I mean, this is the UK, but still. In the story from the Post-Millennial, they say, British MP Claudia Webb is facing jail time after she was convicted of harassment. Webb threatened another woman, saying that she would throw acid on her face and would send naked photographs of the woman to her family. This after the woman had been in contact with Webb's boyfriend, Lester Thomas. According to the Times, the Leicester East MP had been suspended from the Labour Party and has vowed to remain in her seat as MP while she appeals the conviction against her. Webb reportedly told Westminster magistrates during the trial that she had made a series of calls to her boyfriend's friend to express her anger that Thomas and Michelle Merritt were breaking then COVID-19 lockdown rules by meeting up. She reportedly called Merritt a slag in one of those calls, threatened to throw acid on her, and said that she would send naked videos and photos of Merritt to her daughters. I mean, well, this is, wow. This is crazy. Webb told Westminster Magistrates Court that she had made a series of calls to her boyfriend's friend to express her anger at Thomas over breaking COVID lockdown rules. In another call recorded by Merritt, Webb could be heard yelling, "Get out of my relationship," 11 times. Webb told the court that Thomas had been her boyfriend since 2017, while she was unaware the two had previously dated. She said she's not jealous of Thomas and Merritt's ongoing friendship. I mean, this is very clearly, internal issues. But the point is, look, this is the kind of extreme rhetoric, Black Lives Matter, the things we hear from the far left, the things they get away with. And I show this just to make the point about the exception versus the rule. You take a look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, and almost every single person in the mainstream from right to left was saying this is sad. And then you had a small faction of people on the right who were cheering for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. On the left, they show up and pound on the doors of the Supreme Court, calling Kavanaugh all the worst names in the book, accusing him of insane crimes that are just ridiculous. Now, apparently, leftists have stormed the Department of the Interior. Many people are likening it to the insurrection, as the left likes to call it. But of course, they're going to get a free pass on this one. Now, take a look at this story from Post-Millennial. Portland businesses beg city leaders for help due to rapidly deteriorating neighborhood conditions. I bring up these stories in relation to what happened in the UK to remind everybody. We can talk about the far right. I have no problem with that. I think we should. But I certainly think that's all they talk about. The only thing they ever say is the far right is the threat. The far right is the threat. But the far left does stuff too. Now, I don't know that David Amess was attacked by a far leftist. I don't. I'm just saying, for whoever it was wrong. It was bad. It's horrifying. And we need to make sure we're talking about all of the violence. Yes, there are far right extremists. Absolutely. Jo Cox lost her life due to a right-wing individual. Now, many point out, what does right-wing really mean? And I think this is where the interesting conversation actually comes in, because right is not a unifying moniker. You take a look at the left. And when we say the left, what do they have in common? They tend to be collectivist. They tend to support many of the same causes. They tend to be more about socialism or social programs. You take a look at the right, and it's become a catch-all term for not left. It's fascinating. Then when the left criticizes the right, or anybody who's associated with the right, the media just calls it criticizing the right, when in reality, the left is just opposed to basically everybody. For example, you'll take a look at articles written about me saying I'm right-wing when my policies are clearly on the left. The only difference, I oppose critical theory, and I tell the truth. How about that? I get things wrong, but I report the news. I'll give you an example of fake news. David Pakman, I'll give him a shout out. David Pakman posted fake news, and it's not the first time. And in the past, I've reached out to him with like, hey, here's a fact check. He didn't care. He literally doesn't care, okay? I put corrections on YouTube videos all the time. We do corrections on the show all the time. And we try to, when we get adequate, notification of corrections. We have a correction policy on timcast.com. We take it very, very, very seriously. In fact, we're launching a nonprofit to do fact checking. But David posted a story where he said that he posted a video clip of him saying, Donald Trump has told Republicans not to vote, which is just not true. All of these are part of the problem in understanding what's happening. And when you see lies like that, you'll end up with anybody who opposes the establishment is right-wing. But what does that even mean? A right-wing terrorist. Perhaps it could mean ultra-traditionalist. It typically doesn't mean anarcho-capitalist, so I honestly don't know. This is the nature of the world we're living in. Now, this is the UK. I don't know for the harsh details of or the specifics of what's happening with the UK in their culture war, but it is similar. But I will say, if you think the story is bad, then you need to understand that that's the direction we're headed in. We've got people on the left who have cheered for the arrest for harm to come to many people. They're political rivals. The Democrats are discussing arresting Steve Bannon because he doesn't want to testify to a grand jury about January. I'm sorry, to Congress, not a grand jury. He doesn't want to testify to Congress about what happened on January 6th. And it's ridiculous because he could simply just be like, can't remember, don't know, can't remember. That's the thing. Now, if you're saying you can't remember and it's like becoming obvious you're lying, they'll probably put some pressure on you. But for the most part, if you're to testify, I don't know, don't remember. Nope, didn't happen. I have no idea what you're talking about. Steve Bannon saying no, he's not gonna be pressed by this. While this story in the UK, again, I really, really want to stress, I don't think it's escalation. We are getting dangerously close here in the United States. So long as we have a news apparatus that won't tell us the truth, I think we are becoming even more vulnerable day by day. People on the right know, and they're learning their lessons swiftly, that they've got no advantages in the media, that they will be lied about, and then they will go to jail. Because and you look at what's happening with the January 6th defendants. They're having their civil rights violated. One defendant apparently broke his wrist or hand, and a court ruled he needed medical treatment, but the warden and the director of corrections did nothing. Now those two individuals are being held in contempt for violating the civil rights of this individual. The judge said he wants that to be investigated. You look at what happened with Antifa. They went around D.C. in 2017 smashing and destroying, setting fires. They were released the next day. The January 6th defendants have been in for 9 months. Because one's a real threat and one isn't, I suppose. One is actual people standing up and saying no, and the other is a weapon of the state. Antifa is effectively helping out the establishment. Now, some people say they're the violent, militant wing of the Democratic Party. They don't like Democrats. Antifa hates Democrats. But for some reason, they keep aligning with them politically. And so while they don't completely agree, and they'll use those as an excuse to be like, we don't agree, they certainly do. And I'll be the first to say this. My policy positions tend to be further left than most Republicans and conservatives. I'm center left on many issues. And you can take a look at my public donor history, like who I donate to, more Democrats than Republicans, but that won't be the case moving forward. But I have no problem saying that I will agree with and work with Republicans on many issues. I suppose that's true of many of these leftists. The problem, I would not be willing to do that if these Republicans were violent. The left is willing to work with these other leftists that are violent. They're willing to engage in what they call a diversity of tactics. I don't want to live this way. I don't want to hear stories about a guy going to a church and then being killed. I don't want to learn about Jo Cox or any of these individuals. We're bringing to Steve Scalise. I don't want to hear these stories. The stories I want to hear is Sanjay Gupta owned in debate. Joe Rogan, calls out Sanjay Gupta. I want to see Joe Biden called out in a debate. I want to see Donald Trump called out in a debate. I want to see the good ideas win. I don't know if we can have those nice things, though, because there are lunatics who will always push and refuse to just Play by the rules, I guess. Within reason, I can understand someone not wanting to play by any particular rules. But what we're talking about is people who are trying to have a conversation to move their country or cause forward. So long as it's happening peacefully, I think it's a good thing. But in these past few months, these past few years, it really does feel like things are going to get worse, doesn't it? So maybe this story about this assassination is an escalation. We don't know who the murderer is just yet. So I don't want to jump the gun on that, but maybe it's escalation. Maybe we need to be aware of that. We shouldn't live our lives as though it's happening, though. We should live our lives to the best of our abilities as normal. And that may mean leaving cities because things are getting worse. My condolences to David's family, to his supporters. It's a sad, sad story, man. I wish these things didn't have to happen. I wish these things didn't happen. They don't have to happen. That's the point. Misspeaking there. I wish these things didn't happen. They don't have to happen, but some people just lose their minds. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.